Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly AgWeather Update brought to you by Farm Credit. I want to start off tonight by looking at a map showing total precipitation ranks by climate district, and the data go from the beginning of this month up until just before this weekend. What you're looking at here is that we had much of North Carolina, Virginia, parts of eastern Kentucky and Tennessee, and then the northern part of South Carolina very dry. This has been an area that we just continue to see precipitation systems miss. The flow was pretty weak, and as a result, we just didn't have the rain. Now you come down into this part of South Carolina, into Georgia, Florida, and down into Alabama. We did have it. There were storms, repeated storm chances down here. Before I talk to you about the changes we saw over the weekend, though, I want to point out a couple of other things. There are significant parts here of the Corn Belt that have just been dry. The flow has come out of the direction I just drew those arrows. And in spring, which remember we are still in spring, we've had just a lot of upper level convergence. Now, if you just imagine this, if the air is gathering aloft, I'm talking 6 miles above our heads, it's got one place to go, and that's down. It cannot go into the stratosphere. It's got to come down. So what it does is it produces higher pressure, and we end up getting just drier in this region. Now, while all of that was occurring, the whole atmosphere just kept losing its flow, losing its momentum. Normally, we want the jet stream just to scream across the country. I don't care from which direction, just get it moving, get it going across the country. But what it's been doing is it just backed off, it slowed down, it's kind of curled up into here, and there's a piece that's curled up there. But the flow over much of the rest of the country has been almost non-existent. So our storms just keep lining up day after day after day on the high plains, getting all the way up into Montana, into parts of southern Canada. And if it wasn't for a system this past weekend that took shape right here over Florida and Georgia, moved out over the open ocean, and got pulled into North Carolina this weekend, we would not have seen some of this early drought stress relief. What helped it get into this area was a big area of high pressure set to its north, and just the airflow around high pressure centers, they come around clockwise, and that just drove this system into our region. But I need you to see, and I'll show you this to you in another way, just how dry pockets are here throughout the Midwest. So corn and soybean farmers, wheat, this is all an area that has just been under a significant amount of stress. Now, as we watch the sun trying to set here on Monday night, a couple of things to take note of. Let me go back and just show you the whole day. Here's the low, and that low just continued to keep cloud cover over most of North Carolina, the Appalachian Mountains, Virginia, scattered clouds with some isolated rain down here in parts of southern Georgia. But this was what did it. This is what kept us cooler. This is what kept the rain around this weekend. And then this last frame, just as the sun was trying to set, you can really see the effect of the smoke north. So that's under that high pressure cell. And then this smoke that's in through this part of Nova Scotia, again, just a part of more Canadian wildfires. Now, the wildfires that were in British Columbia and Alberta have since kind of been put out by some rain. But now they're still in eastern Alberta, but getting into Manitoba as well. And you can't see that on this image. But what do you notice at the end? The pattern just continues to do what it's been doing, and that is to blow more storms up here. So what our questions are going to be for the Carolinas down into Georgia and Florida is, what are we going to see? Are we going to see more of this troughing that gives us cooler weather and wetter weather, or are we going to start to see what the Midwest is seeing, which is some drier conditions? But overall, that low did this over the weekend. So now we can see just how much rain fell across parts of South Carolina, getting North Carolina, Virginia, and over on the Appalachian Mountains. There was widespread 1-inch rainfall amounts. In some places, easily got up here in this 2 to 3 inch range, and that was pretty well predicted by the models. Anywhere else in the country, it was just here. This was the only other places that we saw good storms this weekend, right up the plains of the United States, and hit this area just really quite hard. Now from here, I want to show you what the temperatures did because of that. So the flow has just died. We have the subtropical jet that just stops here. There's a little piece that comes in there, but it all just built up into a larger ridge that's kind of crashed into this part of the country and set up a trough here. So all the heat has been underneath it into this quadrant, and we have been much cooler than average for the last week or so. In fact, this was one of the coldest Memorial Day weekends in this section of the country in a very long time. So quite cool in here. But just to bring this back to the broader discussion, this is the map that we should really just kind of think a lot about this week. Now, this is only valid through Sunday morning. These maps take an extra day to update due to some quality control issues that they always try to maintain. And what we've got here is just the beginning of the weekend rains coming into South Carolina out of southern Georgia. So much of this in through here, where you see these reds, this isn't here anymore. What is still here is dryness to the north, the dryness throughout the Great Lakes, the dryness throughout the Midwest, and through this part of the Mississippi Valley. It has been extremely wet running up this part of the country, and the dryness over here on the west coast is quite normal for this time of year. So our questions: when does this break to bring moisture back to this area, and does it sacrifice moisture coming into the Carolinas? That's what we really got to discuss, that and where the temperatures are going. So I'm going to show it to you by looking at it first in the upper levels. Here's the low. This is here it is on Monday when I'm recording this, just spinning right here over parts of the Carolinas. It finally moves out Tuesday, Wednesday. But what do we notice? Very, very weak flow. There's just a piece of the jet there. There's a piece of it down here. But in the mid part of the country, I mean, you can use the spacing of these ISO heights. They're like ISO bars. You can use their spacing to determine the winds. And there's just nothing here. So the winds throughout the depth of the atmosphere are just calm. But there is troughing happening underneath this. And I want to talk about that because through Thursday, getting into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, that trough deepens. So this is going to prevent heat from building in, and this is also going to start to change our chances, not only this week, but into next week, of getting more moisture coming up the East Coast. So all the way out to June 6th, I still see a massive ridge in the midsection of the country, and that sits right on top of where it's been so very dry. So we want to know if that's going to move out and if we're going to start to build in better chances of moisture. What it looks like is we're going to have to get all the way out here past about June 8th, 9th, and 10th for this to occur. And what happens at that point is the jet comes in, it makes a little bump up here into the Canadian prairie and then dives. And the spacing of these isobars comes back together. And that flow just meets. And therefore, we're going to see what this does to this part of the country, including, of course, what we're watching for the Carolinas down into Georgia. All right. If that's how our next 10 to 11 days are going to start to shape up in the flow, we need to remember, though, that it's going to take 10 to 11 days to get here. And most of the next 10 days is very dry in this section of the country. I'm showing you this because for corn and soybean farmers in the Carolinas down into Georgia, when you start to see this, this is just, kind of nationally where we have competition. These are the I states, Missouri included, and then Wisconsin. And you can even take this farther back over here to parts of Minnesota. The best chance of getting more than an inch of rain is right here. Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, parts of Colorado, then getting up into Nebraska and back all the way up to parts of Montana as well. And that's right where we have drought. So when we look at this, what are our chances? Well, there's about a 50% chance over the next 10 days we grab another inch of rain. But it's not coming by the same mechanisms that this past weekend's rainfall came through. And we're going to ask, when is this hole going to get filled in? Because this is the area that is, let me show it to you this way. This is the chance that area has that they have less than a half inch of accumulation in the next 10 days. So right here in some critical growing areas in the country, there is almost 100% chance that less than a half inch of rainfall hits this area as we look from now all the way to June the 8th. So with that in the back of your mind, because there's going to be a weather premium that showed up last week, it's going to continue to build this week in the markets because of this for that corn and soybean crop. We need to see what's changing for us. So let's go right now to the 12Z European model run. Get one more. There we go. And this is the from Monday, the low that's still spinning right here. So as we play through the day on Tuesday and just go out here until Wednesday, you're going to see across the Carolinas every day about a 20% chance of getting a shower or a thunderstorm. That's all just from this low. And what else do we see? Well, you just see flashes of green in the plains. And that's where all the storms just keep erupting here, using the upslope flow from the mountains, using the weak kind of tail end of each jet stream pulse that just helps the flow to rise there. So this is out all the way to Thursday. We get out there until Friday. Going into the weekend, I think we get better chances of maybe a little bit of drier weather. But you'll notice this. This is now getting out to Sunday morning, afternoon, and evening. I'm already a week out. And by the time we start talking early next week, I just got to keep an eye out for another potential coastal low where we just wrap the moisture back around the back side of it. So this could be early next week. We're talking about more rain coming into our area. So while the drought risks are very high in the midsection of the country, they're low in the Carolinas, Virginia, they're low in the Southeast, and they're low along the plains. So it's kind of this kind of hop and skip over the Midwest just to leave that area out of it. So what are we talking about in terms of total accumulated precip? Well, again, I'm starting this off on Monday afternoon, and we're just seeing what's left of the current system, adding another couple of tenths of an inch, maybe a little bit more up in Virginia. So this is that 20% chance of rain you're going to see in the forecast all the way through Thursday. Now, getting into the weekend, Friday into Saturday, we just don't see a whole lot of additional precip getting added. But early next week, watch right there. That's when the models are trying to deliver Monday into Tuesday, better chances of heavier rain coming back through. But notice this whole region up here, very low probability of picking up any precipitation. And we can even stretch that out into week 2. So if you look at these 3 maps, this one right here comes from the CPC, this one comes from the European model, and this one comes from the GFS. You notice that from North Carolina to Georgia, in each one, they're near normal to a little bit wetter than normal, except for the GFS model. The driest conditions in each model forecast are here in this area, this part of the upper Midwest. So we're going to have to just see when that breaks, and right now our current thinking is after the 7th and 8th and 9th of June. Now, in between there, what are we doing in terms of temperatures? Well, this is the next 7 days of total accumulated GDDs. Now, I'm using a base of 50 and a max of 86. So whereas Raleigh's going to pick up 133, the Quad Cities between Illinois and Iowa, 171. Mitchell, South Dakota, 166. 179 forecast to be accumulated in Minneapolis. That's where the heat is going to be. In terms of evaporation, if you put all that heat over this area, there may be upwards of 1.5 inches to 2 inches of evaporation if there's water to evaporate, while our evaporation rates here are considerably lower for this time of year. This is what's going on with these temperatures, because take a look. This is Tuesday's highs. We're still in the 70s, maybe even in the upper 60s in parts of Virginia. As we go from there into Wednesday, we just maintain the cooler bias, cloud cover, chances of showers. Finally, by Thursday, we break out and try to get into the 80s. But do we really bring in heat? No, the heat is all here, tucked under that ridge. And going out there into Saturday and Sunday, we just don't break away into hot. So we ask, well, are we just going to stay cool through much of June? And the answer is right now, kind of yes.